what is the best way to deal with a breakup from a long-term relationship? Okay. Well, this is the kind of feelings that come up when you break up. Long-term relationship is a sense of feelings of grief and separation, and these are very similar to what happens if someone close to you dies. Someone dies from you, or your relationship dies. So it's a matter of death and change. Put in purely Dhamma point of view, that as meditators and as practitioners of Dhamma, what we're seeking to do is to look at life more closely and more directly, and seeing in very small everyday affairs this constant change and arising and passing away and coming together and separating. And so when you open your eyes to what's going on moment by moment in your life, you're seeing separation again and again and again, many, many times every day. You're experiencing some kind of separation. So in this way it's similar to a kind of an inoculation. So when you experience the more serious kinds of separation from someone you love, or either through a divorce, or through ending of a relationship, or through death, then it's not something that's going to knock you over altogether and completely overpower you, because it's just more of the same thing. It's the same kind of thing. It's just a more powerful kind of thing, of the same style. In relationships, there are healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships, and love is only one part, I think, of a healthy and mature relationship. And sometimes there are some very unhealthy and unwise attitudes and habits that arise in relationships, which you overlook as long as relationships is going well. But then they come to the fore, they become more obvious when things get more difficult. And if we have very overly romantic ideas about love, then we're setting ourselves up for some serious suffering if and when things do change. Apart from the loss, of the love and the major changes that leads to in your life and your daily schedule and everything, the part of ego and sense of self plays a part, doesn't it? If when someone leaves you, then even if one part of you thinks that was probably in the long run the best thing that could happen, in the short run that sense of hurt and rejection, and that the person you love or have loved loves somebody else more than you and prefers to spend time with them more than you, that's the kind of the knife, isn't it? The poison knife, that's the worst thing. So, to look and to be able to distinguish between the suffering from separation and loss of the loved one and that sense of rejection and the hurt of being rejected in favor of somebody else, and to see, to what extent that's coming from a sense of self. Now, if you become very lazy in a relationship and you overlook your own mental, spiritual development, then you just rely on the other person, particularly if the other person is stronger than you in some way. So you just use the other person as a kind of a crutch and just depend on them for everything. And then when you lose that person, then you're really in a bad way. This happens not just in like romantic relationships, but I've seen this in monasteries when monks become very attached to their teacher, and when the teacher's still alive, they feel great and they feel so wonderful to have such a great teacher, and then when the teacher dies, then they realize that they've overlooked or they've been rather lazy in their own development, and a lot of the peace and the happiness that they were experiencing wasn't coming from their own practice, but was coming through living close by to someone and just sort of basking in and enjoying their barami without developing their own barami. And so in Buddhism we say life is an education. You have to be learning and moving onwards and developing all the time, and that if you find yourself in this like comfortable position, you can stagnate without realizing it, and suddenly if something changes, you realize how few inner resources you have. So the wise person doesn't rely upon anybody else for their happiness. They can receive happiness from others and give it, but not in that neurotic kind of way in which that's all there is. And so you get this very kind of clinging relationship, and the more someone clings in a relationship, becomes needy in a relationship, they usually end up pushing away the other person. It has exactly the opposite effect that they hope for. And you hold on tighter and tighter, and then that person will stay with you, and that person just wants to get away when you do that. So in the end, there's always going to be a period of sorrow, and sadness and pain, but it's how you deal with that. And there are two unwise ways of dealing with the pain of separation. One is just to indulge in it and just sit and imagine all these kinds of fantasies and movies where something happens and they phone up and then it's all back how it used to be again, and everything's wonderful once more, and it could happen like this, and he says this and she says that, and it's just like in Hollywood movie, and just spending so much time regretting the past and wanting it to be back as it was. And then it just goes on and on and on. And the other way is just to try to force these kinds of feelings out of your mind, and no, I'm not going to think about this anymore, and then maybe you start to be very negative towards that person and just get very angry, and then want to shout and scream or run them down and say nasty things about them to somebody else. And so, these are kind of the two immature reactions to loss. It's like the indulgence in it and the anger and the negativity and just not wanting to feel like this anymore. But if you can recognize this just normal part, this is what happens when we're separated from someone we love. It's like this. This is what life's about. It's just like this. And if you're, who knows? In the long run, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, hard to say. There's a famous quote from a Chinese leader, I think it was Mao Zedong, Chu Enlai, one of these people, and at a big conference was asked, what is your opinion of the French Revolution, the results of the French Revolution? and this Chinese leader said, too soon to tell. So, the French Revolution was in 1789, and he was asked in 1960-something, and they said it's too soon to tell. Many of you have had now in good and healthy relationships, it's probably after finishing other relationships, sometimes in a messy and painful kind of way. So if you hadn't had that painful, messy, nasty, awful breakup with that person, you wouldn't be with the person you're with right now. So it's maineh. You see, this isn't just kind of trying to comfort yourself, but it's the truth. It's you can't tell. But there is, my advice is that you need your own inner resources. You can't look for somebody else to make up for all you lack within yourself. This idea, I'm not like this. I'm like, I'm very weak, so get someone very strong. I'm not very good like this, so I get someone like that. And the idea is these two halves come together and you make a composite whole and can sort everything out. It doesn't work like that. You've got to do this work yourself. And the more you are willing and you put this effort into this work, then the more you can contribute to relationships you're in and to make them into healthy and long-lasting relationship. But in the end, there's no guarantees of anything. How you are and your values, and when you're 20, and when you're 25, and when you're 30, and when you're 35, you can have, young man and young woman have, very close in the way they look at the world, in their values, so many things when they're 20, but by the time they're 25 or 30, maybe they've started to go in different direction. This kind of thing can happen. So it's my opinion that I've seen many very unhappy couples who really love each other. And I've seen couples that get on very well and have very successful relationships that don't love each other so much. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't think love is just the answer to everything. It's one thing, so it can be a good thing, but it's not everything. Okay.